Here we go now. Here we go now. Here we go now.
That's right. Here we are. Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor. And tonight I have a amazing co-host to share with you. Howard Bender is away. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to have even more fun and bring in Britt Flynn. But I feel like I'm getting a little feedback. Do you hear that, Britt?
I do. Yeah. Sounds like a Transformer might be hanging out with
It
us
sure
too.
does. So, Britt, you can introduce yourself where I go and check my settings, make sure everything is good on my end. Yes, it looks like everything is perfectly fine. Does this sound any better?
That sounds great. Except now
Cool.
I hear my dog barking. I think my
Oh,
dog's excited for the show too.
that is okay. Pets are welcome here at the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm. We thank you all for being here. I see Jeff in the room. I see Scott in the room. And before we started this show, Britt and I got to sit in the chat for a while and catch up a bit. Now, it was the first time I met Britt was at the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio last month. And now here we are getting to do a show together. And I realized that Britt is familiar with Lisa Ann Does Fantasy, the original that was on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio with my lovely co-host, Adam Ronis.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And I was talking to you about this before the show because back before I got into the industry, I was still working as a bartender. On my drive home, I would always listen to Lisa Ann Does Fantasy. And so now to be able to share the show with you, especially as Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor, I just could not be more excited to be here. And I'm excited to talk about a lot of stuff. This is crunch time.
It is crunch time. And I know you've been drafting like crazy. And I think there have been a couple of nights where I've woken up in the middle of the night and said, do I have a draft right now? Like it's at that point, you get notifications. Am I correct that you got a notification that you're also going to be in a draft with me tonight? Separate draft rooms, both drafting at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Is that correct?
It is correct. Yep. It's that time of year where do you ever get those dreams and kind of nightmares where you wake up and you're like, I'm on the clock. And then you time out and you're like, no, and then bolt up in a dead sweat. That's how
Oh, yeah.
serious we are about our fantasy drafts at this point in the season.
And,
And
I always say like Labor Day weekend is when I start to face like, okay, now we get to decompress. Now the focus is going to be watching games once game one starts on Thursday, September 7th, and no longer drafting. So freeing up the dinner time, the 7 to 9 window, right? It's just a great time to know what's ahead of us.
I can't wait. We've been waiting for 6 months for football to come back. And even the preseason, even as, kind of bad as some of those games were, it was real football on TV. And now we're getting the realest of the real football in just over a week. And I cannot be more excited.
So how are you managing to take care of your food, your hydration, and your recovery during this extreme time that we like to call draft season?
Oh, I am a total couch potato or desk potato as it stands at this point in this season. My husband does a very good job bringing me drinks, bringing me food. He even asked me before the show, it's going to be late when you get done. Do you want me to get a frozen pizza so you'll have some dinner after the show because everything will be closed? He has been completely wonderful. The dogs keep my morale up because I work from home, obviously. They listen to me. They are great listeners. So I've got a completely wonderful support system here at home. What about you? How do you handle
So
it?
for you, you say dogs, but isn't your at Britt_Flynn on Twitter, but Instagram it's Cat Lady Britt. Am I correct? Are you also a cat lady?
I am a cat lady. I've always been a cat lady, but the cats don't listen. They don't care. They want to be fed. They want to sleep during the day. The only time that they want to listen is at 3 a.m. when they're slapping you across the face for more food. So the dogs are actually better listeners, but I do like the cats. But it's kind of an oxymoron, but that's me. I'm a Gemini. So what can I say?
And they all live in harmony at the house, which is the best part. You asked about me. I was in Vegas this weekend. Sapphire hosted this incredible event. It was my first year getting to go. There's a huge pool and there's all these cabanas around the pool. So they turn each cabana into a draft center. And I was the host. So I get to walk around and talk to these leagues. And a lot of the guys, had flown in from all over to meet up with their friends, have their reunion. I will say this. I always tell people don't drink in draft. Just don't do it. And so I'm walking around and I'm looking at some of these drafts that are stalled, right? There's like everybody's on their computer. There's somebody putting the stickers up. They're doing them old school. And I'm seeing like, a defense in the fourth round, a kicker in the fifth round. I'm realizing, oh, there's going to be a lot of waiver wire activity because they're having too much fun at this pool to actually focus on their drafts.
I have to say, I have been guilty of drinking a little too much in drafting before. And then you look back at those teams and you're like, what was I thinking? What happened? Drinking and drafting is so much fun until you have to deal with the team that you've drafted.
Yeah, it's one thing I do not do. I do not drink and draft. The night before I left to go to Vegas, I had a draft here in the city. It's a Squad 18 Firehouse League that I've been in for quite a few years now. And the guys all drink, right? I'll buy them drinks, whatever. I'm water all night, just water and lemon. Maybe I'll eat some bad bar food, which is always enjoyable for a time to time, but no alcohol for the draft room. I feel really good about that team. We can go through that team. But one of the things I was thinking about today, Britt, and again, I'm here with Britt Flinn. Make sure you give Britt a follow on Twitter at Britt_Flinn. And it's Flynn with an I and not a Y. I learned this. And one of the things I was thinking is my grandmother used to always say to me, well, no news is good news. No news is good news. No news is not good news when you've drafted Jonathan Taylor as your second player, second round in a draft for the Queen's Classic. Now we do have news, it's the worst option of all options for someone who's already drafted Jonathan Taylor. And not only that, for Indianapolis Colts fans.
Yeah, it's like being in purgatory or having your text left on red when you don't get any news about these players. And yet we have drafts continuing all throughout, August and up until the season starts. We don't know what we're going to do with Jonathan Taylor. The 4 games that he's going to be out, I've seen him plummet all the way down to the 9th round. I mean, people are just totally out on him. And then you look at Anthony Richardson. He's kind of a developmental guy. We know that he's athletic as all get out, but how is he going to look without that running back support? I mean, Zach Moss may come back. Anybody excited about him? Not really. Deion Jackson, meh. I mean, it's just a mess in Indianapolis, and I feel bad for their fans.
It's a really tough thing to subject a rookie quarterback to as well. Because if you do think about, okay, so 4 weeks, take him off the pup, he's going to come back in. What you want for this young quarterback is routine, consistency. What you're hoping is that by week 4, week 5, you've ironed out the bumps, the kinks, what have you. Not that I don't think he doesn't have, all of the swagger to get it done. I don't like that kind of like movement, right? Because what are you going to do? Put a Band-Aid on it till week 5? Is Jonathan Taylor going to come back happy? How is this going to play out? It's just one of those things none of us really like in a locker room for not just the player that we drafted for me being Jonathan Taylor, but for the entire locker room and the inconsistency that it brings early on in a season.
Yeah, and this isn't like a suspension or something where he got to practice. He hasn't even been practicing. So there is zero rapport with Anthony Richardson. He has no idea how that offense is going to operate. And especially with the way that Shane Steichen likes to utilize the RPO, I mean, this could be a disaster if they don't have that chemistry going into week 5 when Taylor finally comes back.
Yeah, this is not fun. You and I were both in the Queen's Classic. So fun to get to do a draft at a table, 14 of us, a fun league, a really smart group of minds as well. We did have to instill a clock, though, by round 5 because I started to do the math and I was like, all right, 6-minute picks. My attention span can't hang. This is like a slow draft and we'll be here for 10 hours. So we did put a clock on it, would help. Hey, it is great to see Troy King in the room. Chris says Taylor and Kamara are going to be getting drafted in the same round. It's a great one right there. I want to ask you, have you drafted Kamara in any of your leagues so far, Britt?
I actually have. I have him in quite a bit. And even in the Scott Fish Bowl, I think in the Scott Fish Bowl, I got him in the 11th round. So I was jumping up and down over a 3-game suspension. I also got Dalvin Cook in that league. So when he signed with the Jets, I'm like, okay, I'm being advantageous here. I don't think a 3-game suspension is that bad, especially when you consider that running backs typically miss an average of around 3 games per season anyway. He still hasn't moved up in ADP. People are still out on him, and I can't wrap my brain around why he's not going higher. So if you can get him at that value, I say scoop him up.
I completely agree. I've drafted him quite a few leagues. I will need him by the time he shows up. So for 3 games is nothing. By week 4, you're already starting to get prepared for bye week. So if you planned your draft well and you know that you have this balance. Byron had asked me this on Twitter earlier this week. So I want to ask you, Britt Flynn. They're devaluing the running back position. Najee will be in the same position next year. How do you feel about, because I think so much of this is kind of like osmosis, right? Because teams in the league are devaluing running backs. I'm hearing a lot of people in fantasy football talking about devaluing running backs as well, which I think is absolutely silly because it's still about filling your positions, your roster properly, and how much riches do you want to have in wide receiver or tight end when you're going to ultimately have quite a few of them on your bench? Do you see this osmosis happening where actual fantasy players are also starting to devalue the running back position?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think a big part of that started with Dynasty because running backs didn't last as long in Dynasty. And then it's kind of crept into redraft. It's crept into best ball format, specifically Underdog. I think in a draft that we've done several drafts for Alarm Fantasy Football and with the family. There have only been 3 or 4 running backs going in the first round and only, 8 going in the first 2. It's kind of insane to me because running backs still provide a ton of value. Aside from a handful of wide receiver twos, do you really want them on your team or do you want the starting running back? I prefer an anchor running back strategy where I can get that guy and then I'll punt the position a little bit. But yeah, I don't understand the 0 running back strategy. And every time I've tried it, because I have, you know, have an open mind, I've
Dabbled,
tried.
dabbled,
Yeah,
dabbled in it a little bit.
it stresses me out so
Yeah.
bad. I panic when I go 0 running back. I just can't do that. I think that having a good balanced roster is better than this ideological situation that we're taking from the NFL's reality.
And it's like I'll use Josh Jacobs as an example last year, who was getting completely pushed down in the rankings and who had 2 and 3 touchdown games. Like you're looking at the upside of a Nick Chubb or a Saquon Barkley. And I think this is all going to cycle back. The agents are going to have to get smarter when they sign young running backs. There's going to be money front loaded at the end so that the teams aren't able to say this position is so much less valuable because their careers are shorter, which I do understand, but I don't agree with. So I think this will balance out. And I think by then people will be playing a bit of catch up. I can understand the dynasty aspect of looking at it that way, but I could not understand in a redraft league valuing a running back any less than a powerful and successful wide receiver.
I agree completely. And going back to what you were saying with paying running backs more on the front end, I actually kind of went off. I rarely do Twitter threads, but I went off on an actual Twitter thread last year because I think that the way that running backs are treated in the NFL is completely unfair. And if it continues, then who's going to want to play running back? I think the quality of the NFL as a product, which it ultimately is going to be diminished because who's going to want to play and put their body on the line when they're not going to get adequately compensated for it? It's going to become a big problem if they don't fix it.
I think we'll see it adjust this year, and I think we'll see it play out starting next year in the draft. I think it's going to be a conversation amongst agents of how do we do this, because you have to look at these players as taking the most damage to their bodies, right? Putting themselves in the most line of fire, trying to run through a line of, 1,200 pounds. And then also knowing right off the jump that, yes, their career is going to be shorter. So they do deserve the money. They don't need to be going out there and getting a job when they're 28. You know what I mean? They do deserve to make this money and they do deserve to be appreciated because they are so fun to watch. We forget about what it was like when Melvin Gordon was out there and Todd Gurley, like high jumping over defenders to get into the end zone. And you see this kind of athleticism. That's what makes football great, is all of the positions being able to bring us a different level of joy by, Tyler Lockett with his toe drag swag. Whoever's got something, they're all in different positions and we need to value them equally.
Yeah, the Emmett Smith days, in the early 90s, watching Emmitt Smith, those are some of my favorite memories, is just watching him completely destroy opposing defenses. It was great, and we need to get back to that.
How many redraft fantasy football leagues will you be in this season, Britt?
Oh my gosh. I think I've lost count of the actual redraft. I have a gigantic whiteboard so that I can keep up with waivers and when I need to
Yes.
do this, because again, as a very ADHD person, I get sidetracked a lot. I think the total number of leagues is around 50. Uh,
Oh
I might
my
I might need an
gosh.
intervention.
50 redraft leagues? Oh my gosh, your waiver wire nights are going to be so intense. You're going to start doing lineups late night Saturday night, re-tinkering on Sunday. I'm sure you're going to be doing live streams. So you got to fit in what you do for everybody else, helping them set their lineups. And you rush back to it. You forget which lineups you did. So your wipe off board, it's funny you say that, but that's one of my tasks for Labor Day weekend is to set up my system and my strategy, because you know how we're on multiple different platforms and you could have one league on some random platform that you almost forget about. So you have to go through this like checklist. Okay, I have the most in Yahoo, so I'll start there. Then I'll go over to ESPN and I'll go there, because you're going to make a whole cycle and then go back. But it's about being organized, because if you're managing 50 different season long leagues with different waiver wire, all of the things that you're going through, you got to have a system.
Yeah, and I'm even in a college football fantasy league for FSGA. So now I have to set lineups on Saturdays. How what? What did I get myself into? Guys, I need an intervention.
Listen, this is the life you choose, Britt. You choose to be here and to be putting, and it's hard because it gets to this point in the season where it's hard to say no. Somebody you really like reaches out to you and says, "Hey, we have a spot to fill in a draft." And you're like, "Oh yeah, get one more." But I just started to say no last week.
Yeah, and then I look at my bank account when all the league dues come due and I'm like, "Oh, oops." And I
But
thought
remember
that I was
something, it
being
is a business expense.
No, it is. I just thought that I was being savvy by paying it through PayPal, but the PayPal sends an email, which also goes to my husband's phone. So I was not as sneaky as I thought I was being entering all these leagues.
Well, I'm excited that we're going to get to talk to Warren Sharp tonight. He's coming up at 7:30. We're going to talk about Sharp football analysis. How much of it did you get to go through, Britt?
I did. It's insane the depth of what he does with his analytics. And I wish that I had a sponge as a brain and not just this, very smooth top that's floating around in my head, because there is so much information going in there. He breaks down, quarterback percentages in the pocket when they're pressured, every single situation that you can think of, the secondary defensive lines when they're playing, what kind of base defense. I mean, this is in-depth analysis, and I cannot wait to have him on the show and pick his brain.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Now we have a couple injuries. Now Thursday night, it was Thursday when Jerry Judy is carted off during practice. And of course, I'm in the draft room. We're live at a sports bar. I tell you, everybody's been drinking. And one of the guys goes up and I see him typing in, Jerry Judy. And so my other friend in the league looks at me, he's like, well, do we tell him? And I'm like, no, you do not tell a league mate the news that they should know to have. And ironically, I was able to get Cortland Sutton in like the 9th round in that draft when he's sitting there with Jerry Judy in like round 4. Now we know Jerry Judy, it's going to be a short-term IR, but it still doesn't make me feel great with working with Russell Wilson. What we see, we know Russell Wilson has to overcome this season.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on who you ask and what your belief system is, Cortland Sutton's going to be the number one in that offense anyway. So now Judy's dealing with this injury. We don't know when he's going to be back. It's a soft tissue injury, which is very concerning because it can linger. And we saw it last year with Keenan Allen. It seems like every week it was, oh, he's going to be back. And then he wasn't. Oh, he's going to be back. And then he wasn't. So that's concerning in and of itself. But if you look at how Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi utilize the X receiver, and Howard Bender has hammered this into my brain, the X receiver in those offensive schemes are the ones who get the targets. I think that people are a little bit shell shocked and living in last year about Cortland Sutton's lack of touchdown equity. But this year, I think that that's going to change. And as long as there's not an ADP correction, smash that value, baby.
I also think it's the doubt that a lot of fantasy football drafters have in Russell Wilson. So there's that concern as well. We go by a lot of recency bias. We're not looking at the coaching change with Sean Payton coming in there and making a huge difference of things that he's already done differently. And Russell Wilson has been already a little bit less annoying this preseason. So that's good news. Another player in my Queens Classic League, okay, that you're in, we did the draft together, Jackson Smith Najigma. Injured. Okay, now great. Returns to practice less than a week after having surgery on a fractured wrist. It's still not a great feeling.
Yeah, I wasn't very in on him to at the beginning, to be honest, because I don't feel like he's going to overtake Tyler Lockett, at least for the first half of the season. Then you consider that Seattle runs one of the most 12 personnel packages in the entire league. He's going to be the odd man out in 12 personnel sets. So I was already a little bit down on him. Now with a wrist injury, I know that he's already back at practice, but having that injury can kind of cause some hesitancy. It can change the way that you catch the ball. I mean,
Everything.
it's not an easy thing to come back from, and I wonder if they maybe rushed him back a little too soon. I know everybody's celebrating about it, but it scares me.
Well, bringing him back to practice is one thing. We don't necessarily know what the depths of his practice is doing. Like, hey, if they're just having him running and keeping his cardio up and getting involved minimally, then that's smart. But if they are having him catch some balls, that's probably pretty silly.
Yeah, I saw a video of him catching today. So I think that they're full on, yeah, just pushing it. I don't like it. As somebody who
Good.
still has a bump from breaking my hand that never healed, I can't imagine being out there less than a week after surgery and trying to catch a football.
Great news for my friend Scott in the room, who is a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. Joe Burrow is back at practice today. Calf be bothering no more. How many shares with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow do you think you have across the board when it comes to best ball leagues and redrafts so far?
I have so much Joe Burrow. It's been hard to get Jamar Chase because he is going so early, but I'm actually putting out an article on Fantasy Alarm in the next day or two with an argument that Jamar Chase should be the 101 over Justin Jefferson. So I absolutely love that. I was a little bit worried because calf injuries can tend
Yeah.
to be linked to Achilles injuries later on in the season if they don't heal properly. But it looks like everything's all good for Swaggy Joe. I am so ready to see him back out on the field and can't wait to see him get over that hump in the AFC, which is super stacked.
Traylon Burks returned to practice yesterday, and all of your prayers, my friend Britt Flinn, were answered. So I'm pretty sure that you're high on Traylon Burks this fantasy football season.
I am. It took me a little while to reevaluate him after the DeAndre Hopkins signing. I prayed to the signed Traylon Burks ball behind me for advice. Uh, I think that actually having another wide receiver who's worthy of some coverage is going to help him in the long run. And we saw a little bit of that in training camp. Now, granted, what you see in training camp video is edited. It's not exactly the full picture, but I do like that he's going to be drawing some cornerback two coverage instead of the number one corner in that offense.
So we've got Warren Sharp joining us at the bottom of the hour. We have both a draft. Do you know your draft position for your 8 p.m. Eastern time draft tonight, Britt?
I do. I'm drafting out of the ninth spot. It's a 14 teamer, 6 point passing touchdowns for quarterbacks, but it is positionless. So everything else is a flex. So that's going to make it very interesting. What
Wow,
about you? What are your settings?
what a cool, it's a straight PPR. Quite a few of the drafters have never played fantasy football before. They're big college football, basketball, baseball. So this is going to be interesting for them. I'm drafting from the 8 spot. 9 is actually my ideal sweet spot. If you remember, when we picked the deck of cards, we were able to choose where we were drafting from for the Queen's Classic. I chose 9. I think at a 12 to 14, it's such a sweet spot. You get to really survey the room. I just don't feel, I don't love double tapping. I don't love being first or 12th. I think sometimes, you're always forced to reach because you're over analyzing who's going to be there for you and who's not. Whereas I think at 9, if you see 3 tight ends go, you're like, okay, well, that run's probably over. I don't need to jump on that run. You can watch it all go. This is a 12-team league that I'm in, so it does make it a little bit easier, especially for the waiver wire, than a 14-team league.
And that's such good advice that you mentioned right there is watching how the draft room falls. I think that so many times people are just looking at these linear rankings. They're looking at ADP and they're like, okay, well, I need to take this player. But if you're not paying attention to how that draft board's falling, how these runs are going, you could be left out in the cold on a bunch of these positions. So paying attention to your draft room and knowing who you're drafting with as well is very important.
We've got a pretty robust chat tonight. Chris likes drafting from the 4 spot. My friend Jeff loves picking mid-round. You can keep up with the trends. And Better Boss is very happy as well about the Traylon Burks news and says his value is in the toilet. You should scoop him up right now.
It's true. It fell in the toilet, honestly, after DeAndre Hopkins got signed, and then even more. People are avoiding the updates that he's actually back out there practicing. He's running at probably 70% full speed. We've still got another week. Even if he doesn't play in week 1, I think that this team's going to be pretty decent, a lot better than we expect just because of the coaching schemes. I'm not just saying it because the ball god is behind me.
Right. And who is your alliance? Who's your team?
It is the Cowboys.
That's what I thought. I'm never a Cowboys fan. There's so many of us, Britt. We're just we like flock to each other. It's like an astrological sign. Speaking of astrological signs, you mentioned you're a Gemini. I'm a Taurus. Did you know that tonight's full moon we will not see for a minimum of another 10 years? That is a blue moon tonight. And ironically, the storms that are going on in the south, the gravitational pull from this moon, it couldn't have landed at a worse time for this moon to happen at the same time as tropical storms.
That is really interesting. I didn't even know that there was a supermoon, but maybe that explains why I want to do an all-nighter tonight and catch up on some work because there's a huge supermoon happening.
That could definitely be it. I read every full moon detail every single month. I'm going to need to know. I got to catch it a little bit on my flight out the window last night, which was beautiful. I was excited to be flying and get to see it glowing. But yeah, that's always a big one for me. It's little nature things that I'm super drawn to.
I love, and I'm just going to bring this up again, the part of your book, The Life Back, when you talk about gardening and flowers. I was like, wait, what? Lisa Ann likes to garden? We're best friends. And I didn't even know you. I love that is one of your passions and that nature is so fun because it is so important and people don't get enough of it, especially being in cities and traveling and things like that.
Yeah, and just growing up in Pennsylvania, like that's what we did. We were only allowed to watch an hour of TV a day. That was split between my brother and I. But if it was sports, we could watch more, but that was it. We were outside playing, and that's just always been like if I have free time, I'm bike riding, I'm in the park, I'm taking a walk. I just want to be outside. And so I love everything that comes with all the magic of nature. And it's just so beautiful when you really lean in. In the future, Lisa, when I talk about my future life, like when I'm not traveling as much and my life, the goal is a garden and dogs. Okay. Those are the 2 priorities that must re-enter my life as I get older. Dogs, multiple, and a garden. For everybody out there, I want to remind you to play real-time sports, daily pick'em contests, set a lineup of player props, hit them all and win. Baseball, golf, and more. 2 correct picks wins 3 times your entry. 3 correct picks wins 6 times your entry. 4 correct picks wins, this is almost a tongue twister, 10 times your entry. And 5 correct picks wins 20 times. And 6 correct picks wins 40 times. Go to rtsports.com/alarm. First-time depositors get 100% instant match up to $200. Please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. We love all of you right here in the chat. This is absolutely fantastic. I know Jeff was going to be hitting with grain, which meant you weren't going to be able to grill before the show. Jeff likes to smoke some barbecue and make some steaks before he sits down to enjoy the show, which always makes me hungry when I see the photo on Facebook of what he'll be eating while we're working. But when we get back, we're going to have a nice conversation with Warren Sharp, talking all about Sharp football analysis. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Sharp Football. You're listening to Lisa Ann and Britt Flinn right here on Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm.
Better Sports Network. Collectible moments.
Everybody up here at U.S. Cellular. Sox 5 runs, 6 hits. The 2-1 to Bartlett. Swing, chop to short. Ramirez has it, throws. Burley picks the perfect game. His second no-hitter. People going crazy here at U.S. Cellular. He's mobbed by his teammates. A perfecto.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ, lays it in. Right up, 1 second left. What a play by Bird. Bird stole the impounding pass. Laid it up to DJ. DJ laid it up at him. And Boston has a 1-point lead. With 1 second left.
Out of the I formation on first down. Peterson to carry, looking for running room on the right side, has it to the 25, across the 30, across the 35, and out of bounds at the 40-yard line. Adrian Peterson has just gone over 2,000 yards for the season, the 7th man in NFL history to cross the 2,000-yard mark.
Well, a thundering ovation for number 66, Mario Lemieux.
Just the emotion I'm sure Mario is feeling in this place. You don't appreciate something until it's gone, and it's so great to have Mario back.
Yager turns around. Over to Lemieux. Mario Lemieux, his first goal in his comeback here tonight at the Mellon Arena. And the Penguins lead 3-0, and he is smiling like a butcher's dog. Mario Lemieux.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. The Bears have scored, but the bands are out on the field. Pearson moves in front of the STP does. Petty comes back to the inside. They almost touch as they move down low in the banking. They're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line. Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? Pearson is still running. The winner is car number 21. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished in the front end, as well as car number 21. An unbelievable finish, a terrible crash. David Pearson has won the Daytona 500. Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores! Christian Leitner has hit the bucket at the buzzer! Pitched by Downey, swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron. The most valuable player is Magic Johnson. 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. He starts at center, plays forward and guard, and leads the Los Angeles Lakers to a world championship 123-107 over Philadelphia.
Whether you collect sports memorabilia, fantasy championships, or winning bet slips, talk about it on Better Sports Network.
And we're back right here. Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor, powered by the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm, getting ready to be joined by Warren Sharp. You can check out the 2023 Sharp Football Analysis Preview, and you can follow at Sharp Football. Warren Sharp, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Certainly excited for the football season, like I'm sure you both are. So definitely excited to share a little bit of analysis with you.
Yeah, I don't know if Britt and I are more excited about the football season or just kind of, getting through draft season. Right,
Yeah.
Britt?
Draft season is it's grueling, but it's so much fun, and that's why we do this, and that's why we look for analysis like yours, Warren, because you have so much great information both on your website and in your new book coming out. I got a chance to read a little bit of that, and the depth that you take us in throughout that book is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, look, I tried to get you guys a printed copy. I don't think it got there in time for the show. We gave you the PDF, but and the printed copy is right here. It's 532 pages of analysis. It takes me and my team months. Ever since basically free agency, we start grinding on this book, and we're trying to predict the upcoming season. And as you guys both know, having drafted fantasy teams and continuing to do that before the first opening game starts next Thursday, it's a challenge to predict the future. But that's really what we're trying to do here. And we have 32 team chapters breaking down what happened last year, why teams had records like they did, but maybe aren't indicative of their actual strength, such as the Minnesota Vikings, who won 13 games, but really should not have been a 13-win team, or a team like the Atlanta Falcons, who only won 7, but I think probably could have won a few more. And then we just try to predict teams that we're higher on, players that we're higher on than the market. And I think that is really useful for a lot of the people out there who are listening, and they can go to sharp.football. And for you guys, we did a coupon code. Just use the code SHARP, and you get the book for less than $5, and you can have it here in time for the football season to start.
It must be an incredible undertaking, evaluating injuries, a season where a player missed 2 or 3 games, throwing off the stats, understanding coaching changes, everything that goes into trying to predict a new season. Here we are trying to predict, I said to Britt earlier, Warren, I said, remember the days ago, somebody would say to you, for me, it was my grandmother. She would always say, no news is good news. And for like 5 days, I heard that ringing in my head because I wanted some news about Jonathan Taylor because I thought I got a value drafting him in the second round of the Queen's Classic at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, we know Jonathan Taylor's been such a hot topic. You tweeted about him yesterday. Now that he's going to be on the PUP, where do you feel comfortable taking him for this upcoming fantasy football season? Or at all, do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, that's a real challenge in my opinion because Chris Ballard obviously is trying to say the right things publicly. He's trying to say that all relationships can be repaired. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't necessarily believe that Jonathan Taylor is just going to come back and start producing at a high level. We know that he's injured right now. I mean, that's part of the issue with Jonathan Taylor is that he had a lot of injury issues last season with this ankle that continued to flare up. He would come back, then he got hurt again. He would come back, but he's not quite 100%. And then he got surgery this offseason, but he's still not ready to play. There's a lot of question marks, even if he were fully healthy, just given the length of this first 4 games that he has to be out. But I just don't know if he's going to come back and want to play here for this team. I don't know if the team is interested in rushing him back. I think that the Indianapolis Colts earlier today, it's funny, this team had 3 active wide receivers on their 53-man roster. I mean, so if you tried to use 4 wide receiver sets, you would not be able to. You could not even utilize a 4 wide receiver set because they only had 3. Now, they've since added another one, but they have a lot of growing pains I think that they're going to be in store for. And so you have to wonder, are we in a good game script situation to even get anything out of Jonathan Taylor if we're losing late in games? Because most coaches tend to take out their best players if they're either up big or down big late in games. I mean, they don't want to put the extra mileage on them anyway. So even if you're down late, that doesn't necessarily mean that Jonathan Taylor is going to be the recipient of a few of these carries, because why put miles on his tires that they don't need to do? So I think the whole thing's a mess. And, me personally, I'm looking to avoid him entirely.
Yeah, and then you think about he hasn't built a rapport with Anthony Richardson like we brought up earlier. You mentioned the lack of wide receiver depth. They put Jelani Woods on IR earlier this afternoon. So they don't even have that tight end depth that we need to see from them with that lack. So I'm very concerned. I agree with you. But I want to know, especially after last night's Hard Knocks and all the love that the Jets are getting, are we too high on them after that Hard Knocks bump? Or do you see them being one of the top offenses in the league, even in a stacked AFC?
Well, I think they are going to be a very good offense if they can protect for Aaron Rodgers. One of the issues that Aaron Rodgers had last year, beyond just his thumb in Green Bay, was the fact that he did not feel comfortable with his receivers and the offensive line. So he was throwing at the shortest drop depth in the pocket of any quarterback. He was getting the ball out faster than any quarterback. He just was trying to avoid hits. I think he's going to be more willing to take those types of hits in New York for the Jets because it's his first impression that he gets to make in a new city. However, that is a concern given the fact that this offensive line is probably the singular largest weak spot of the New York Jets this upcoming season. In terms of being too high on this team, the way that I look at everything from a betting perspective is what is the market, and that's going to help dictate whether or not I see value here. And absolutely, I think that too many people are backing the New York Jets this season, and thus they have an inflated component to them that I'm steering clear of in the futures market. I'm not looking to bet on this team to go over their win total or in any futures for the season. The only player, however, that I have dabbled in from a player props perspective is I did take Garrett Wilson over 7.5 receiving touchdowns. I think Garrett Wilson is going to be a perfect pairing with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers always gravitates his targets to a number one receiver that he has a lot of comfort with. And I think he's already developed that chemistry with Garrett Wilson this preseason. I believe that they're going to utilize Garrett Wilson early and often, particularly down inside of the red zone. He's going to be there. Davante Adams. And Davante Adams had double-digit touchdowns every single year in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. with one exception, that's when he missed some time. I think he missed 2 games and he fell just below 10 receiving touchdowns. So I think as long as Garrett Wilson is relatively healthy, even if he misses a game or 2, I think he's going to get at least 8 touchdowns.
You know, Warren Sharp, we're talking to right now. Follow on Twitter at Sharp Football. I got to keep it right in New York with the Jets and ask Dalvin Cook, the addition. What does this do for Breece Hall coming back? And are Dalvin Cook managers drafting him too high, thinking he's going to be 100% of the workload for the New York Jets running back room?
Yeah, I think Breece Hall is a real dark horse candidate. Obviously, just as you indicated, Lisa, the public gravitates towards the flavor of the week. What have I seen lately? And that's, where is Cook going to land? And he's the big name. Oh my gosh, he's going to New York. He's going to be paired with the Jets. I got extremely lucky last year. I bet the under on Breece Hall's rushing touchdowns. Rushing yardage. And I should have lost that bet 10 out of 10 times. I got so lucky that he actually ended up being injured, and that's the only reason I won that bet. He absolutely exceeded my expectations and pretty much everybody's expectations. The burst that he had, the acceleration that he had, they probably overused him a touch, but I believe he's going to be just as, if not more dynamic than Dalvin Cook. Breece Hall was excellent last season before his injury. So if that injury doesn't slow him down, he's absolutely going to earn touches and share this backfield with Cook. I do not think this is going to be Cook number 1, Breece Hall number 2. This is a 1A, 1B type situation, and I'm really interested to see, we don't know yet, how it ends up going throughout the course of the game as to whether or not the coach will run with the hot hand or try to balance things evenly, because different offensive coordinators, different running backs coaches end up going with different strategies. Some of them want to try to even the workload. Others will go with whatever guy they think is showing that special quality in the first, 15 plays, 20 plays of the game, first quarter into the second quarter, and then they'll use that guy a little bit more later. So we don't know yet until the week kicks off. Doesn't help you from a drafting perspective, but I absolutely think that Cook is going to be the starter to start the season, but look out for Breece Hall because he's going to definitely be competitive for touches.
Man, I was just bragging in the start of the show that I got Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara at a discount, and now you've bumped me out with your.
I think Dalvin Cook is going to get those starters reps, but we just don't know yet how often they're going to try to work in the number 2. And I think he's going to prove that he's not just a number 2, but he's a 1A behind Dalvin Cook number 1.
Well, and I defer to you. That's why I'm bummed, because you do such great work. And one of the things that I love is your analysis of explosiveness rate, because not only is it a huge tenet of fantasy football that we don't want players on bad teams, but you've actually put together the numbers and proven this basically over the years. One of the teams I'm very interested in that you've talked about potentially increasing their explosiveness is, if you can't guess from the ball behind me, is the Tennessee Titans with Treylon Burks in his second year. So what's your outlook on the Tennessee Titans this season?
The Titans are a team that I'm big on, actually. I think they can be a dark horse in the AFC South. I actually have some futures on the Tennessee Titans at plus 400 to win the AFC South and come out and surprise the Jaguars. Now, I don't think it's likely, but I do think that there's a good chance, and there was some solid value in taking them at 4-1 odds to do just that. This team is so well coached. Mike Vrabel, if you remember, Mike Vrabel went into Kansas City with Malik Willis as his quarterback last season and was leading over the Kansas City Chiefs on the road in prime time. I mean, that is an outstanding coaching job if I've ever seen one. He understands the intricacies of how to get his team up for games. The one issue that I have with the Tennessee Titans, and I don't know what's going to happen now that they've gotten rid of their offensive coordinator who was there for the last 2 years, but this was a team that just turned around on first downs and stuck the ball into Derrick Henry's belly and just said, go try to get yards for us, even though it was super predictable and even though those runs were very unsuccessful and inefficient. They need to be passing the ball just a touch more on first down. I think that will open up more of the offense in general. I absolutely love Tajay Spears. Out of 54 running backs this preseason, he was the number one in yards after contact per carry. Thus, he's getting those big breakaway type runs. And that's going to be interesting to watch him and Derrick Henry because they're very different runners. Derrick Henry, I tweeted out a clip earlier this offseason, probably like a week or two ago, of Derrick Henry's like top 10 longest runs. This guy is a freak considering he's like 6'2", 250, 260, but his breakaway speed, his long speed is insane, out distancing cornerbacks and safeties. But Tajay Spears has that quick, short burst that he can just get through the line of scrimmage and surprise these defenders, hurdle them, cut around them, spin moves, stiff arms. He showed it all this preseason. I think this team, I mean, they have their weaknesses. Their offensive line is a problem. They don't have a lot of depth at that receiver position. But it is a team that I'm excited to see if their new offensive coordinator can dial up a few more passes on first down. I think they can be a team that surprises a lot of people, is very competitive in ball games. And I'm looking at them week 1 against the Atlanta Falcons. Against the New Orleans Saints. They're on the road in New Orleans against the Saints, catching 3.5 points. I think that's an interesting spot for the underdog Tennessee Titans.
We are here with Warren Sharp. You can go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. So we want to know how this all got started, but yet there's a lot of chats going on, Warren. We've got Better Boss who says Sharp football team is high on Atlanta this year. And then we've got Jeff in the chat who really wants your take on his Chicago Bears.
Okay, so the Atlanta Falcons sort of become the team of Sharp Football this year. It's not because we think they're going to win the Super Bowl, but it's because so many of the experts at our site believe that they're going to exceed expectations. I've bet them to win more than 8 games, which was what their win total was earlier this offseason. I bet them long shots to win the NFC South, to make the playoffs. I think that's the stronger bet than to win the NFC South because I do think the Saints can be an interesting team this season. But the Atlanta Falcons, think about this, guys. Last season, they played 17 games. They were in 15 of 17, meaning they either won those games or they lost by no more than 1 score, which means at any point in time late in that fourth quarter, if they just scored a touchdown, they would have either won that game or sent it to overtime. 15 out of 17. The only teams that did better were the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. But the only reason that the Atlanta Falcons aren't more discussed is because last year they only won 7 games, so they didn't put in the wins despite being competitive in those games. And last year they ate $84 million of dead cap, which is money that they're paying for players to play on other teams besides the Atlanta Falcons. This year, they don't have that situation. Their GM has done a better job, as has Arthur Smith, their head coach, of reeling things in, controlling the spending the money on players that are actually going to contribute to their squad this year. Their defense has improved. Their offense is a little bit better. I think Ritter cannot possibly be worse than Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota was absolutely terrible last season. So I think the Atlanta Falcons can come out and surprise some people this season. As for the Chicago Bears, this is a team that does have a lot of hype, like a lot of groundswell amongst the community. These grassroots people, they love betting on the Bears because there's good value. I think the Bears could be an interesting team this year, but I still wonder if they are going to be putting enough around Justin Fields to make him successful, because I don't think the defense is good enough yet this season. I worry about this offensive line. They're starting with Tevin Jenkins on IR. That means he's their starting guard. He's missing their first 4 games. That offensive line was a problem for this team last year. Yes, DJ Moore is fun and explosive, but beyond that, I do have questions at the receiver position. And so I just don't know what the ceiling is for the Chicago Bears. I'm certainly not taking any futures on them. I'd love to see Justin Fields play great and make some explosive plays and look better than he did last season even. But a team like the Green Bay Packers, same exact division, is currently projected to be in 4th place in the NFC North. And I just think that there's a higher ceiling for the Green Bay Packers than there is the Chicago Bears. I took a long shot flyer on the Green Bay Packers to win that NFC North division because unlike the Chicago Bears, there aren't as many questions along the offensive line for the Green Bay Packers. I think they're going to keep Jordan Love upright. I think they're going to protect him better. And I think as a result, he's going to show out a little bit better than Justin Fields will from a passing perspective. And so I expect more out of the Green Bay Packers than I do the Chicago Bears this year.
Yeah, you mentioned that Chicago Bears offensive line. Alex Leatherwood, oh my gosh, what a bust. What a bust.
Yeah, that was a difficult pick. It's not atypical of John Gruden and his squad out there for the Raiders. That is a team that has been a tragic mess trying to draft players the last several years.
Okay, Britt, you wanted to ask one more quick because we know we've got to let Warren Sharp go. He has to be hard out at 10 of the hour. So do you want to go in real quick?
I do. So I love people's backstories and how they got started in this industry. You do so much great work over at Sharp Analysis. How did that site come about, and how did you grow that site to where it is now?
Well, it started up as like a side project when I was in college, and then I started working as a professional engineer, got my degree in engineering, but on the side, I was always working in football analytics, getting my hands on some data. I started posting some of this as well before Twitter or anything like that. I started posting some of my analysis onto some message boards, and it caught the eye of some pro bettors in Vegas because I was hitting games at a pretty high clip. I went out there, met up with them, started providing private information to some of these professional betting syndicates out in Las Vegas, and then eventually started up a website, and it took off from there. Now I actually consult with some different NFL teams and some of the offensive coordinators, have friendly relationships with some of these guys as well. And it's, really the site has grown a ton over the last 3 years even.
We thank you so much for your time tonight, Warren Sharp. Everybody go out there and get the 2023 football preview for the Sharp Football Analysis. You can go to sharpfootballanalysis.com and follow at Sharp Football. Again, thanks so much and enjoy the season.
Thanks, guys. Use that coupon code SHARP and you'll get the book for less than $5.
Sounds fantastic. Britt, I know that's the first thing we're going to be doing on the break, right? Is actually, because I still love a paper book because, if I'm sitting out in the sun or I'm somewhere in nature, I don't want to have on my phone with the sun. It just works. But we're going to get into a little something before we get to our next quick break. Now, you know all about this underdog higher or lower. Do you not, Britt, Flynn?
I do. It's one of my favorite games to play. I love not only analyzing everything, but I love the payout structure that they have here. If you win on 5 of your stat picks, 20 times your entry fee. Absolutely love this game and cannot wait to get into it with you because I think I've got some juicy ones in here.
So I'm going to throw one out and we're going to let the chat get engaged as well. So the first one I'm going to throw out right here is Calvin Ridley. I'm throwing Calvin Ridley out there intentionally because I know I did a ton of best balls with some of my friends in the room here, and Calvin Ridley was highly drafted. Now, are you going higher or lower to the room on 61.5 receiving yards versus the Indianapolis Colts? Don't forget, if you go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog, use the promo code ALARM and it gets you 100% deposit match for up to $100. This is for first-time depositors. You've got the Best Ball Mania for the weekly winners, but to the room, I see some already in there. So now I'll go to you, Britt. What do you've got? Calvin Ridley, who was my second wide receiver I drafted in the Queen's Classic right after Jackson Smith-Njigba. For this first game, 61.5 receiving yards against Indy. Are you going higher or lower?
I'm going higher. And I have to say, I was so mad at you for taking Calvin Ridley. I had my eye on him there in that Queen's Classic. But thanks to Sharp Football Analysis, again, thank you, Warren Sharp, has the Colts secondary ranked 31st in the league.
Not a great place to be.
No, it's not great, Bob. The last full season that Ridley played, he ranked 7th in yards per route run. He's going to be the first targeted guy on this offense. If it follows anything that we've seen in the preseason, higher all the way for me.
And we've got the same going on in the chat right here. Scott says over. Chris says totally taking the over. Better Boss says over on Ridley. Colts defense is going to be worse this season. Jeff says over. So we've got this one. Let's go for another one. Derek Carr, 219.5 passing yards versus the Tennessee Titans. Look at that matchup and look at another defense. So that's Derek Carr, 219.5. Is the room going with the over or with the higher or lower on this total, which is 219? Now, Byron Nelson says Ridley's overrated. I don't think he is. And I think it's so different when a player is out for an injury versus out because of another situation, right? It wasn't that he was injured. He's ready to be back out there. He looks great. I love his quarterback. So I think the connection there, we've already seen it at camp, but we've got Derek Carr here. Are we going higher or lower on 219.5 passing yards up against the Tennessee Titans?
I'm going to keep it going with higher here. Again, thank you to Sharp Football. The Titans secondary ranks 22nd this year, which isn't quite as bad as 32nd or 31st, but it's not exactly where you want to be. Last year, Carr averaged 234 passing yards a game. Now, with a presumably healthy Michael Thomas and Chris Olave at his disposal, I think that he definitely goes higher. And he's also bulked up. Have you seen him?
Yeah, he has bulked up. He looks great. Let's go for another one right here. And I'm asking this one because I think, bringing Kellen Moore for the Los Angeles Chargers, I think is going to be a huge difference for Justin Herbert, which we know the beneficiaries are going to be Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, maybe Quentin Johnson. So we've got Keenan Allen here, 5 receptions facing the Miami Dolphins, who do have a decent defense. Are we going higher or lower to the room? Again, let me repeat that one. It's Keenan Allen, 5 receptions against Miami, higher or lower?
So I'm going to keep this going and go higher. Allen only had less than 5 receptions twice last year. One was in the first game where he injured his hamstring. The second was in the game where he re-injured his hamstring and wasn't quite ready to come back. Now he does have Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. If he does operate out of the slot, I don't think that Xavier Howard's actually going to cover him. And even if he does, he's still allowed a 50% completion rate out of the slot. This is going to be a shootout with a ton of passes. So give me that higher all the way.
All right, last one here before we get to a quick break. We've got Jahmyr Gibbs. Are you going higher or lower on 48.5 rushing plus receiving yards facing the Kansas City Chiefs?
I'm going to do a clean sweep here, and I'm going to take higher again. So this one's kind of misleading because if you look how good the Chiefs were against the run last year, they only allowed an average of 107 rushing yards per game. But this receiving aspect absolutely intrigues me. The Chiefs gave up an average of 47.1 receiving yards to the running back position last year, and Chris Jones still hasn't reported to camp. So I think that combination goes higher all the way.
I'm higher on that one, and so is the room. And I agree with you. The Chris Jones piece, this is so interesting because there's been so many compromises when it comes to money made by Kansas City Chiefs players. And I can understand where Chris Jones is at, but at the same time, can you justify being paid more than Patrick Mahomes? I mean, you're in a spot where you're on a winning team. There's something to be said for that as well. I did not expect this holdout to play out. We've never heard of any bumps in the road in Kansas City. It always seems so honky-dory. And now we're not seeing honky-dory. And I think it's going to make a huge difference for the games that Chris Jones is not present.
I completely agree. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can get something resolved before the start of the season, or we might not see the Chiefs win as much as we're used to seeing because that schedule's pretty tough.
Yep, they do have a tough schedule. We have a tough break that we're going to get to. When we get back, we're going to continue this conversation. Don't forget to go and give Warren Sharp a follow if you're not following already on Twitter at Sharp Football, and go to sharpfootballanalysis.com and use the promo code SHARP to get your discount on your book. Thank you to Britt Flinn because it's great doing a show with you. I mean, when Howard Bender is away, we still got to have some fun. And I want to remind you, you better log into your draft when we're on this break because you and I are going to be on the clock. I'm drafting from the 8 spot. You're drafting from the 9 spot. Let's get this party started. Second hour of the show, we're going to be talking about our picks. We want to hear how you feel about our teams. We'll go through some other drafts that we've done over the past week or so. You're listening to Lisa Ann and Britt Flinn right here on Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers? In favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC, tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback. So that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only 2 wide receivers or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Ecklers, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're in the middle of a draft and you just noticed that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player, because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy isn't my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
And here we are. We are back. Lisa Ann and Britt Flynn right here, getting ready to step into the draft room with all of you. I've got picks already coming off the board. This thing has already started. I am picking from the 8th spot. You're listening to Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor. We love all of you in the room. Better Boss says it is a draft palooza going on, which is so true.
It's that time of year. This is draft-a-palooza like next couple weeks. I love it. I live for it.
Now, what platform are you drafting on tonight?
This is Sleeper.
Okay, I am on ESPN. Now, it's always so different because you want to look at the draft board. You want to see your other players, who's going. So you're always like, every site is so different.
It is so different. And like you said, when we play on so many different platforms, it kind of takes a little bit of an adjustment period to get ready. And you have to look and say, okay, where's this? Where's this? Am I all set up? And another good piece of draft news, like looking at the board and knowing your draft mates, get into this draft room an hour, 30 minutes before the draft starts so that you can figure this out, because there's nothing more annoying than somebody being like, wait, I don't know how to pick, and then having the draft get paused.
Yeah, I actually always step in midday and just make sure I'm logged in, because we're drafting on so many different platforms. I'm like, where is this draft? You find it. I am going to be up. How close are you? How is your draft moving? I'll tell you who's gone so far. It's interesting. Justin Jefferson went first. Let me see this draft board. Okay, so I'm looking at all of my pick. Yeah, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp's gone, Jamar Chase. I am looking at Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Saquon Barkley. I don't have a lot of shares of Tyreek Hill this year just because of draft order, where he's falling. Who are you looking to get? Now, again, this is not a super flex. We do have a defense and a kicker, so we're looking at a regular standard redraft league, 1 quarterback start.
Yeah, this one actually hasn't kicked off yet. I think we might be running a little bit behind. Nobody's gone off the board yet, but this is 1 quarterback, 6 points for each passing touchdown, which puts a little more emphasis on the passing quarterbacks. And it is all flex. There are no positional spots. So it's going to be very interesting to see if people attack wide receiver like we were talking about before, or if they take that positional scarcity in running backs and how this board's going to fall. I'm looking for CeeDee Lamb, obviously, because I'm a Cowboys fan, but I would also like Garrett Wilson, and I'm very high on Jalen Waddle as well this year.
So I started off my draft with my first pick. Travis Kelce went right before me. I am, again, drafting from the 8th spot. I went with Tyreek Hill. I had mentioned I don't have as many shares as I'd like. How can you not love the cheetah? I think Tua could really, really have another incredible season. Remember what he was doing, what Tua would have accomplished if he didn't get injured and was sidelined through the end remaining of the season.
And what Tyreek Hill could have accomplished. I mean, He played almost basically 5 games without Tua, and then he comes out and says that he didn't even watch film or he didn't know the playbook. I mean, now that he's had a full year in this offense, he's going to go sky high.
Yep, he's going to go sky high. And I know that you have a little game show that we're going to be doing while we do this draft. So we're doing Behind the Door, kind of like the theme of the game show, Let's Make a Deal.
I would argue that it is the hottest game show since Let's Make a Deal. And basically, the way that I structured this game, I wanted to make this a lesson about relying on last year's stats and cherry picking about what you either like or dislike about a player. And so these descriptions may or may not paint the entire picture. The way this game goes, you have 3 choices. We're going to read the description. You have a choice of picking your preferred player. Then we're going to reveal that player. After we do that, you have the choice of either keeping them or passing and choosing one other door and seeing if you can get a better player. So do you want to get started?
Yeah, let's get started. I'm 3 picks till I'm up again. My draft is moving at a nice pace. I love this league already. I like when people are on it. They know what they're doing. It'll slow down, I'm sure, mid-draft, but go ahead. Let's go for the first one. And let's see if anyone in our chat here also, oh, please let this work out for me. You know, when you're like one pick up, you just don't want the player that you want to be taken right before you. I'm in that spot right now. We all know that is the excitement, the adrenaline pinching part of fantasy football draft night.
I purposefully don't put people in my queue when I'm in that position because I feel like I jinx it if
I'm
I
the
put them in my
same.
queue.
I only do queue later when there's some flyers that I know are getting lost down in rankings and I don't want to forget about them. So like midway through the draft, I'll start to put some players in my queue and just move things around, give me a little bit more time to look at bye weeks. Do I have any conundrums? All right, I'm up. And Nick Chubb was taken right before me. Very upset.
Oh,
That's where I was going to go. Not ideal in this situation. So I'm looking at Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, Josh Jacobs, and Joe Mixon. I don't have a lot of shares of Josh Jacobs. And at this point of the season, I like to diversify. Had a lot of success with Jacobs last season and think this could be another season where they keep the ball on the ground. What's your take on Josh Jacobs' production this season?
I'm kind of lukewarm at best on Josh Jacobs. I don't like that Raiders offensive line, the combined experience that they have going out there. And honestly, I don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. If people don't respect the quarterback, he's going to face a stacked box at a much higher rate than he did last season. Devontae Adams doesn't like that offense and has been very vocal about it. So I'm just a little lukewarm, but that doesn't mean that he can't return value.
I ended up going with a wide receiver. So now I've started out my draft with 2 wide receivers, and I went with AJ Brown because if you can get some shares in Philadelphia, that team that was all the way to the Super Bowl last season, I'm all about it.
I think that that's a great pick. So since you've made your pick and we have a little bit of time, now we can get started in the game if you are ready.
Let's do it.
So we've got 3 doors. Behind door number 1, this wide receiver has had over 1,000 receiving yards each year of his career. Part of this is a result of his deep ball targets, where he ranked 3rd last year. Behind door number 2, this wide receiver only played 74% of his team's snaps last season, and he ranked only 42nd in yards after the catch. He also only ranked 80th in target separation. Finally, behind door number 3, this wide receiver has been called injury prone after missing several games last season, but still he ranked 13th in yards per route run and 8th in target separation. So, Lisa, I ask you, what is your choice and which door would you like?
I think I want to go door number 3.
All right. Do we have door number 3? Door number 3.
By the way.
I know, it's so great.
It's so great. Okay, door number 3. Does anybody else in the room want to get involved here? Door number 3, I was going to say Mike Williams. I was in the right wide receiver locker room. I just had the wrong player, and that's Keenan Allen.
I love that. Keenan Allen, I think, he's been unfairly labeled as injury prone because in his entire career, last year was the first year that he actually missed a decent amount of time. And when he came back, he was wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, depending on your platform. So now I'm going to ask you, are you happy keeping Keenan Allen, Or would you like to see if there is a better option behind either door number 1 or number 2?
I would like to go to door number 2, please.
All right. Who is door number?
Door number 2. Ooh, Chris Olave. All right. Okay.
Yep, and that's what I meant about this game. Might be a little bit tricky because those stats don't sound great. 80th in target separation, not a great snap share, not a great yards per route run, but he's going as wide receiver 12 on Underdog right now. I think that he's a great value there and that he's set up for a breakout season. And it just goes to show you that not everything and every stat that you see actually correlates or translates to fantasy production going into this season. Would you like to stick with Olave, or do you want us to reveal what could have been your option behind door number 1?
I would love to know what my option would have been behind door number 1. Give it to me, Britt Flynn.
Behind door number 1 is Mike Evans. I know that 1,000 yards each year receiving sounds very, very enticing, but now that he's playing with Baker Mayfield with a low ADOT situation, don't necessarily know that he's going to return on that production. Do you think that this could be the first year that he falls underneath that 1,000-yard threshold?
I do, and it doesn't help him that he's also fighting against Father Time, right? There's two things at one time. I think he's going to have to be even more elusive to be able to have success with Baker Mayfield and potentially throw himself into harm's way from time to time, which none of us really like for our receivers. So yeah, and I feel it's going to hurt both Chris Godwin as well, another player who's been close to 1,000 yards a season. So yeah, if I have to choose out of those 3,
I think you just won the game on this one. But
okay,
with Chris
okay,
Olave,
'cause I went in order.
yes, you're perfect. Do you want to double or nothing it on a round 2?
Obviously, I do. And I love that everybody, by the way, Rachel, shout out to Rachel. Byron says, shut the door and don't come back. You shut the door and don't come back, Byron. Has your draft started yet, Britt?
It has. So we have gone it was very interesting. At pick 3, Travis Kelce went, which is interesting in a positionless board. It was Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelce, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Austin Eckler, Cooper Kupp. Bijan went 8th, and we ended up with Stephon Diggs in the 1st, which I'm not disappointed about.
At the 9 spot, you know what? Josh Allen was on Pat McAfee today. And I don't know if you know that Stephon Diggs was named the team captain again for the 3rd year in a row, which makes everybody feel good about maybe some relationships woes that we were feeling earlier before preseason and before camp started.
Yeah, let's just bury that drama. Bury it, put a bow on it.
Little bickering happens, though. You know what I mean? Little bickering happens. You're going to have to bicker a little bit. We don't really know what the truth is, but I will say this. Josh Allen has really changed his body makeup this year. He's a lot leaner. He's doing more fasting. Talked about all the different things that he's added in. He's finally doing cold plunge regularly. I don't know if you know that I do cryotherapy 5 days a week. So I go into the freeze tank for inflammation and helping me being able to work out really hard. You're sore halfway through the day, you go into the freeze tank, your body doesn't even remember you worked out.
I'm going to have to try that. I'm very cold averse, but if it works, and it obviously does.
It works. And also for energy, especially, I flew in this morning. So, getting to go to cryo and fight that inflammation from travel is really helpful. Cold plunge is just a little bit more intense because you're just going into cold water. The cold room does not bother me. 230 degrees below freezing. I could be in there 3.5, 4 minutes. I'm good. But it feels great.
Something about the
Really
water.
does. So it's good to see.
The water
Yeah.
makes it different.
It just seems more painful. Yeah.
So how's your draft? Are you back around the swing?
Okay, so not yet. It did slow down a tiny bit. So far, I've got 2 wide receivers. I started out with Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown. I am looking to, I'm on the clock in 5 picks. I am looking to make some running back decisions with this round.
Perfect. I don't want to get too far into this in case your pick comes up, but we can go ahead and read off your choices, and then we'll just let you marinate on it while you wait on your pick to come up. So in the second choice, We again have 3 doors. This time it's running backs. And again, everything that you hear may not paint the entire picture. So behind door number 1, this running back has never had a 1,000-yard rushing season, is over 28 years old, and his team ranked 27th in rushing attempts last season. Behind door number 2, this running back ranked 6th at the position in snap share and finished 9th in fantasy points per game. Finally, behind door number 3, this running back has had over 1,000 yards each of the past 2 seasons, but he has never averaged over 4 yards per carry. So I will let you make your pick if it's coming up, and you can marinate on that. And after that,
Oh
you're
no.
like, I already know.
I'm gonna go with door number 2.
All right. James Conner behind door number 2. He has looked good as far as a bell cow back. Does this Arizona offense concern you? And are you happy with this selection?
I love James Conner, and I love the fact that the offense does scare me. I think he is the option in Arizona. I think he's going to have another solid season. He's got a great story. He wrote a great book. He's overcome so much. His dedication to stay on a team that we all think stinks and not go out and try and make a move excites me a lot. I've gotten him in 2 or 3 of my drafts. I'm surprised how far he falls. But I will not do Kyler Murray again this season because what I learned is he doesn't make it past game 7. He's usually pretty banged up, and you're going to be relying on the run game. And there was a time where Kyler Murray was a rushing machine, and then he realized he can't, right? So let's go next to door number 3, Britt.
Behind door number 3, we have Najee Harris. I know that people are down on his efficiency, but he is that bell cow. And Matt Canada has said that he is, quote, unequivocally the starting back. Are you comfortable with Najee Harris?
May I just tell you that Najee Harris was the only player in my queue, and Najee Harris is also the first running back in my running back room. So Najee Harris, welcome to my team. I'm glad that all the stars aligned. The fact that this was the segment, you were the number I picked, that Britt put this together for us tonight here, really makes this seem magical. More than just the blue moon that we're not going to see for another 10 years. Britt, this is yes, I am in. I think people are sleeping on Pittsburgh's offense and also sleeping on Pittsburgh's defense. Tomlin gets it done and is not going to have another season like last season. So I'm all in and drafted Najee Harris as well. And by the way, before we go any further, we have someone, Chris says, I know who is door number 1. So I think it's a great idea for let someone in the room tell us who is door number 1.
Door number 1 is Austin Eckler, which is why I put a little bit of emphasis on everything might not paint the entire picture of what's going on here, because Austin Eckler has never had a 1,000-yard rushing season, but he gets so many targets that he finished as the RB1 last season. He's currently being drafted as the RB2 on Underdog. Are you happy with Najee as far as ADP value where you got him, or would you rather have taken Austin Eckler?
Oh, Austin Eckler was long gone in my draft. And yes, you're right about looking at last year's stats and what we know about the team, because we always feel that no matter how close the Los Angeles Chargers get to a victory in the last 3 minutes, they could always lose the game. Well, that's going to be very different this season. Kellen Moore coming in there. This could be more opportunity, more consistency for Austin Eckler. He's a hard get in a fantasy draft, but I'm going to say I love Najee more only because, recency bias. I just drafted him, but I get the Austin Eckler love, and he also loves fantasy football.
He does. And somebody who loves both the game and is so friendly to fantasy football players holds a very special place in our heart. But that wraps up behind the door. Have your pets spayed or neutered, guys. I guess we'll just we'll wrap it up on that.
Didn't he say have your pets spayed or neutered? He would do like back in 2 or something
it was Bob Barker, but
Bob Barker.
I couldn't really think of a way to wrap it up. I'm like, well, we've talked about dogs. Here we go.
How are you round wise in your draft? I don't love this 2-minute clock in my draft, by the way. When I commission, you get a minute. Okay. If you can't figure it out in a minute, because 2 minutes is a huge difference for the length of if anybody is in auto draft, right? And I get it. Not everybody can make it. Your kid's got a soccer game. You have things to do. We get you. Okay. That's fine. But 2 minutes is like time standing still, especially when you're up at your pick and you know the two people before you are both on auto draft and you're like, this is going to be the longest 4 minutes of my life.
Yes, and then I get out of my zone. I start thinking about different things. I'm in total agreement with you. 60-second pick clock is all you need. You don't need to go through your whole entire sheet and mark people off and figure things out. Luckily, in this draft that we are doing right now, it is a 60-second clock. I am next. Well, I should say Hope and myself, my Joe, with the pro. So we are up next. We currently have Stephon Diggs and Jalen Waddle. Again, I normally wouldn't be 100% confident in this start just because of a lack of running back. But since this is positionless, I'm pretty okay with it. I'm waiting 15 seconds until we are up next.
Well, you wait your 15. This is the Book It Sports draft. So Mikey Overs reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to be in our first season of the Book It Sports draft? Stephanie Smalls is in this draft, and I'll tell you who she's got so far with her first 3 picks. Went Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, and then Jahmyr Gibbs.
I love that. Gibbs in the third.
Love it. Did the same as me in the sense of like, okay, I'm going to go with some 2 strong wide receivers because that's where I'm at right now. I am up again in 2 picks, but again, we've got some auto drafters here. Who is so far making up your roster?
So we just made our final pick here. We took Justin Herbert, as it is a 6-point passing touchdown league. I am so in on Herbert, y'all. I love him. I think that he could lead the entire league in passing yards. Yes, even over Patrick Mahomes this season. People forget that he played hurt the majority of last season, that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were hurt, and that he was playing with guys like DeAndre Carter and Jalen Guyton. Now that he has a full staff and a new offensive coordinator, it is wheels up, and I am so excited about this pick.
So I'm debating right now between Dameon Pierce and James Conner, probably because James Conner is fresh on my mind. I do like the situation for Dameon Pierce. Understanding his strength last season when we saw him out there was incredible. And I just don't think the Houston Texans are going to have much more to do than run the ball this season. But it is going to be a slow rolling offense that will be playing from behind. But I feel like James Conner's in the same kind of a situation.
Yep, absolutely. And I will say that I was a little off on Pierce because I thought that whole D'Amico Ryan situation, it would play out more of a split backfield. But in the preseason, he played every first team rep, and his breakaway, yards after contact, things like that, he excels completely. So it doesn't really matter about the line. I'm kind of leaning Pierce here, but I'm curious to see who you pick.
Yeah, I went with Dameon Pierce right there. My pick is done. I now have 4 picks in the books. I started out my draft with Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Najee Harris, and Dameon Pierce. I feel good because I have some balance. What I don't feel good about is the fact that my 2 stud wide receivers share a bye week.
The bye week battle. It is always so tough.
But, you know, and I'm always really on it, but it's just doing too many things at one time. One thing is going to fall apart, but there'll be a wide receiver that I'm able to get, and I will be mindful. Like, it's okay if you realize you've overdrafted a bye week, but once you have that reality check, you have to remember to just shy away from week 10 for your next wide receiver or 2. Do you do the same? You could make up for lost ground.
Yeah, I think there are 2 ways to look at bye weeks, and it depends on how you want to build your roster. If you want it more balanced and you want a starter every week, then yes, you pay attention to bye weeks. If you find yourself that a guy with a ton of value has fallen but has the same bye week, maybe you just cash that up and chalk it up for a loss for that week 10 and then go on and steamroll the rest of your week. So it's really more of a philosophical question. I tend to like balance, but I can see both sides.
Now, let me ask you a question about how you feel about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, the quarterback, Britt, you and I haven't had much of a chance to talk about. I kind of see Daniel Jones and Mac Jones in a similar way. I wonder what it's going to take to get them, you know, putting more touchdowns down. The 15 for Daniel Jones last season. Now, getting Darren Waller is exciting, but it makes me wonder, he didn't utilize Evan Ingram when he had him. And look what Evan Ingram became when he landed as a tight end in Jacksonville. There's so many ways to look at this because of the tremendous amount of coaching changes Daniel Jones has already gone through as a young quarterback. But where do you stand on the potential connection he's going to have with Darren Waller?
I think we've already seen it. I think it is completely simpatico. And the fact that they had to take Darren Waller off the practice field in training camp just so that Daniel Jones would throw the ball to somebody else. If this was Valentine's, this would be a Valentine's Day card with "I only have eyes for you" in little hearts going everywhere for Darren Waller.
I love it.
Because
yes, that's exactly what it would be.
yes, that connection's humongous. The only issue that I have is, again, Waller's injury concerns. He is older.
Yep.
That's reportedly why the Raiders traded him, was because they were concerned about his injuries. But man, if that connection stays strong, I love it so much.
How can you trade a player the day after his wedding?
That was so
Couldn't you have
cold.
a little leeway for that? I mean, you're just packing up to go on the honeymoon, making sure you have enough bathing suit trunks, doing your thing. It just seemed like poor timing. It's like getting fired on vacation. Nobody wants
It was
that.
like the Browns posting on social media, "Happy birthday," and then 2 hours later canning him. Like, what are we doing here, guys? The cut day was the next day. Could you have let this guy have a good birthday and then cut him?
Right, can you just give a little grace period of bad news around birthdays, holidays, weddings, all of those great things? I've got a couple picks till I'm up. We are getting into entering round 1. Scott said that was brutal. Byron says he asks us, can you trust Justin Herbert? Britt, Flynn, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago how high you are on Justin Herbert. So talk to our friend Byron about your reasons why.
Yeah, I think Justin Herbert has been one of the best pure passers in the league. Their defense still has a little bit of holes on it, so they're going to have to throw. They're in a very tough division. He's had over 4,000 passing yards each of his 3 years in the league. Now he's got Kellen Moore. He's got some healthy weapons. He has Quentin Johnston, who is a big-time vertical threat, who's definitely going to play a part in that offense. I absolutely think that Kellen Moore is going to utilize him and utilize him heavily. And with that arm strength, we are going to see beautiful things.
Yeah, these sites need to catch up. We still have the questionable tag on Joe Burrow, which is probably keeping drafters away because, believe it or not, even though we're in round 5, we've had a couple quarterbacks go off the board. But there's a team I love that started out with Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, and Calvin Ridley. I mean, it's a pretty nice team, but you did take a quarterback super early. Patrick Mahomes, of course, is off the board because when Jalen Hurts goes, Patrick Mahomes goes shortly behind. Then usually next up would be Josh Allen, who went to the team that also has Christian Watson, Cooper Kupp, and Joe Mixon. What was interesting was Cooper Kupp was the second pick in this draft.
That's
a bit early for me.
Yeah, he's coming off of that tightrope ankle surgery. If you hear the reports on Matt Stafford, I mean, he is the get off my lawn guy at this point, having to make a literal print out Facebook to know his players' names. I mean, this offense just, I do not have any confidence in it. The win totals that they have, their tough division, I'm not exactly in on Cooper Kupp. I see the upside, but that's a little too spicy and risky for me.
We're going to continue along with our drafts. We're going to also go through an Underdog ADP chart and remind you to go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog. You can use the promo code ALARM. It gets you a 100% match on your first $100 deposited. Britt, get back to drafting. We'll be right back from a break. All of you can add in how you're feeling about our teams. We'll continue the conversation. You're listening to Lisa Ann and Britt Flynn right here on Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been, I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So I if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it. But yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
And we are back with you right here, Lisa Ann and Britt Flinn on Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm. We appreciate all of you in the chat. We want to remind you to follow Britt Flinn at Britt_Flinn. Share this live stream. You can share it easily once it's posted under the live category on YouTube. You can hit that share arrow and share it with your friends and followers on Twitter, Facebook. Same with the Fantasy Alarm page. Now we are at the part of the exercise where we're making bad jokes in the chat. Do you do this? Because normally, if I was drafting and not hosting a show, I would be all up in the chat because I like to throw people off. I did have Breece Hall queued up. He just got taken from me. But here's the thing. I went into the room and I said, listen, this 2-minute clock is unacceptable. If people can't make a decision in 60 minutes, then they shouldn't be in the league. Michael writes, I just want to recognize now how long 2 minutes can feel. So I responded and said, some may wish 2 minutes seem this long in bed. We're at that part of the exercise where I am making bad jokes while I'm waiting for my picks because my queue is getting dumped. I did fill my queue in case you and I got distracted and got busy, but here I am. Queue is just sitting there and I am 3 picks away with too many decisions to make. How about you? We are entering... Smalls is making a pick right now. I am getting ready to go in 2 picks.
Yeah, I'm coming up close. I think I'm about 4 picks away. We are into the 5th round. So this is where some of those tier breaks happen when you have positionless drafts. And so it's going to be very interesting to see who's still available on the board. Jonathan Taylor is still available. Nobody is in on him right now. I'm just fingers crossed, hoping that we get our guy. But I'm not going to jinx it and say it out loud, because that's just bad juju.
And I'm getting to the point in the draft where the top layer of quarterbacks, there's still some decent options, but not everybody I would love. Now I can let it go for another round. This would probably be the round where I would do it because of where I'm circling back in 6, a little bit shorter than if I wait again. But it's just that Joe Burrow is just sitting there staring at me and it just won't stop. I'm almost hoping at this point that someone drafts him before me so that I can go and pick up George Pickens or Cortland Sutton or maybe even Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, but how can you say no to those beautiful seafoam green eyes that Joe Burrow has and that quirky sense of humor? I think you did make a good point earlier in the last segment saying that it seems like people are scared of him because he still has that questionable tag next to him, but he's still Joey freaking Burrow. I mean,
well, He is now Joe Burrow. Welcome to my team. I will hopefully draft one of your teammates so you have a friend in the locker room. But I think you're going to get along very well with everyone. Just promise me that you will bring that magnolia silk custom suit that you wore last season because it was my favorite look for you. I do like to welcome my players to my teams.
I noticed that in the Queen's Classic. It was so fun. I think we were all just chatting and we were still just out of it a little bit because it was still early and very chaotic. And when you started talking and you're like, welcome to my team, I was like, what? And I think we all kind of looked over, but then it became such a fun exercise. And I was like, I can't wait to see who Lisa picks next because you're so theatric with your picks. And it is so inviting. It feels just a little bit more homey that you
It does, especially if you're going to try and get those double points. You're going to maybe get Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper. If you get two players, then you're like, hey, I made sure that you had a friend, so you don't have to eat at lunch alone, and you already got an in-house buddy, right? So I make this a whole thing, and so I did take my first quarterback because again, looking at the room now, mind you, a lot of people in this draft have never drafted a fantasy team. And I find first season people are more apt to know all of the quarterbacks and draft them a bit early just out of comfort. It's not that it's a bad pick. It's just that when you're in a room with more seasoned drafters, you can usually hold out to like round 7, round 8, maybe longer and keep watching. But that top tier starts to go, those top 10 go. You've got to be willing to pivot and not just be so stuck to what you intended on doing when you entered your draft.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see early drafters make is that they go into a draft with a preset plan. These runs happen on these positions, and then they break tiers just because they're afraid to miss out on the run. That really costs you in value. You've got to go in and be fluid. Yeah, you can have your players, your guys that you like, but you can't be stuck on those guys if you don't get them and then panic. Panicking in the draft is the second worst thing that you can do besides drinking while you draft.
Agreed. And so, Alvin Kamara is off the board and went off the board before I took Joe Burrow. And it went on a little bit of a quarterback run. Justin Herbert went, I went Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson went, and Trevor Lawrence went. So luckily, I had the foresight to say, if I don't get a quarterback right here, I might be stuck. And look, I'm not opposed to Geno Smith. I'm not opposed to, as we say, and Byron likes to get on me for this, a serviceable quarterback. But I'd love a quarterback with a little bit more upside and swagger.
The swaggy Joe, man. And then you don't have to worry about it because when you get one of those good quarterbacks, you don't have to worry about taking a second one except for in your bye week. So that frees you up on your bench to potentially take, a dart throw on one of these rookies, one of these kind of lower tier players that may break out and can benefit you later on in your draft.
Let's talk about these Underdog ADPs. So you guys can go to fantasyalarm.com/NFL/ADP. Joe Mixon is going RB13, ADP 39.3, or Najee Harris going running back 14, ADP 42.2. Who do you prefer in that situation? Obviously, Joe Mixon was still sitting there for me. I would rather take Najee because I do believe that Joe Burrow will run a bit. I don't always love to take my running back that's competing with a running quarterback.
Yeah, I prefer Najee. Again, I think that Pittsburgh's offense as a whole is going to improve in Kenny Pickett's second season. And people were really down on Najee, but they forget he played with a metal plate in his shoe because he had that injury for the first 6 games of the season. That offensive line was terrible. They've improved upon that. I think this offense as a whole is going to be completely more functional, and I really like Najee here. I'm also worried about Joe Mixon's legal situation. He still does have a little bit hanging over his head. I know that one of them was cleared, but he's not all the way free and clear yet. And I would just rather take the guy who I think has higher upside, and that for me is Najee.
Now, for anyone in here who is drafting for the first time, which I don't think anyone is, how do you plan your bench? Do you look ahead at your bench and more likely look for potential injuries, handcuffs for a running back, or do you look at your bench as upside players that you probably won't trust till like week 4, week 5, once you see what they can do? They might be a trade bait. They might also go back on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I typically only handcuff players who have a pure handcuff. And I think that people take the term handcuffing a little bit to the extreme because very few running backs in the league have like that Alexander Madison to the Dalvin Cook situation. In a lot of these instances, it becomes a full-on committee, and then it doesn't benefit you to take that handcuff back. So for the most part, unless I get a pure one-to-one handcuff, I'm going to look for upside players. And I also love the people who take those handcuff players, get frustrated in the first 4 weeks, and then drop them to waivers because they're not doing anything. And then you can just come right in and swoop them up. I don't know. I'm advantageous. I like to go Goodwill shopping. How about you?
Yeah. And also, you can't give up too quick, especially if it is a younger player or a player that's just moved into a new system. You cannot give up that quick. And you shouldn't really need to unless you're trying to fill a spot. I think the first, excuse me, 4 weeks of the season, I think a lot of people spend too much time making too many moves. And when they're making those moves, they're not being as mindful of their bye weeks. And then when the bye weeks and bye Mageddon, that really crunch time between 6 and 9 hit, they're really struggling. There's nothing worse than having to consider getting rid of a player that you love because you just left yourself in a situation. So I might analyze the waiver wire weeks 1 through 3, but I don't make a lot of moves unless I'm forced to because of an injury.
Yeah, 100%. Getting waiver wire happy. Not only, we always preach against tinkering with your lineups on game day. I would also like to preach against tinkering with your waiver wire and trying to go get the next spicy thing, because not only are you going to put yourself in a bad situation with bye weeks, in leagues with fab, you're going to blow your fab for no reason. Save your fab until it actually matters.
All right, let's go through another one of these ADP right here. We got the Underdog ADP chart. I'm going to ask you one of the players is in my queue. Don't tell anybody. We got Chris Godwin, wide receiver 31, ADP 61.3, or George Pickens, wide receiver 32, ADP 62.8. These two are so close. But to me, they're not close at all.
They are so close, but they're on different ends of the spectrum for me. On one hand, you've got Chris Godwin, who is a proven PPR machine, has put up yards after yards after yards, year after year. But now with Baker Mayfield and the absence of Ryan Jensen on that offensive line, how efficient is that offense actually going to be? On the other side, you've got that unknown in George Pickens, but the upside there is absolutely insane. So for me, I think that I'm taking George Pickens. I would rather take that upside and have the chance of blow up weeks rather than just relying on that safe little floor.
I completely agree with you on that one right here. So I have Pickens so far in, I think, 3 of the leagues that I've drafted. I know we were going to go through your Britt Modern Family draft, but there's just so much going on right now. What round are you in? How long is the clock in the pros with Joes?
We are currently entering round 7, so it's moving fairly quickly. The clock is only 60 seconds, but it is 14 teams. Right now, our team is Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Justin Herbert, DeAndre Hopkins, George Pickens, and we got our first running back in David Montgomery.
Ooh, okay. So so 14 team, that shows you how different round 7 looks than round 7 for me, right? Because this is just a 12 team and it does make a big difference. And by the way, I'm telling jokes in the chat. Here's the joke. When does a joke become a dad joke?
Oh my gosh, I know this one, but I can't remember when.
When it becomes apparent.
Jesus. It's so good. It is so good. Oh, it's so good.
I just gave the answer. So we're at the dad joke part of the queue can be so much fun. And this is why drafting is something we love. We get to know our league mates. We've got a lot of comments going on. So Byron says, Calvin Austin will be the next Steelers receiver. Chris says, Pickens is my number 1 wide receiver 2 this year. Want as many shares as possible. And Darren says, somebody's using the name Darren Waller. And the image, Darren Waller. Pickens, Steelers, wide receiver 1 by the end of the season. Albert, great to see you in here. So yes, we were at that point. Jonathan Taylor just went the last pick of the 6th round.
That still seems just a little bit high for me.
Well, yes, because it's not the same as Kamara. Kamara, we know it's 3, he's back 4. We don't know if this is going to linger further. He could stay on the pup. He could stay on the injury list. He could miss the rest of the season. There's just too many unanswered questions. There's also kind of bad energy, right? Bad juju because they're not getting along.
Yeah, and seeing his face in the pictures. JT looked so happy last season on the sideline. The photos from training camp this year, he looked like an entirely different person. You can visibly see in his body language that he does not want to be there. And I'm not convinced that he actually plays for him, even when he's off pup.
Agreed. Do you want to go through your draft, or do you want to hit a couple more of these ADPs from the Underdog ADP chart that can be found at Fantasy Alarm by going fantasyalarm.com/NFL/ADP?
Yeah, let's hit a couple more of these because it seems like we've stalled. We're in that part of the draft where everybody's making some tough decisions here. So it's taking a little bit.
And I don't think everybody understands how badly I want to go to bed after the show. So now it looks like I'm going to be up later drafting, which is not ideal, but it's all right. I'll put my office things away while I do it. We've got Mike Williams, who's a player I've always liked. We've seen him deal with injuries over the past couple of seasons, but we also know that he is a quarterback that we both really trust. Mike Williams, wide receiver 22, ADP 44, Britt, or Drake London, wide receiver 23, ADP 45.3.
This is another one where it's kind of like the unknown, right? Like Mike Williams looked really good. He does have that high-powered offense this year. Drake London, despite a massive target share, this team doesn't throw that much. I'm still going to go with the younger guy in Drake London. I loved what I saw out of him in those last 4 games with Desmond Ridder last year. In those 4 games, he averaged 83.5 yards per game, which would have put him in the top 8 of all wide receivers had it been throughout the entire season. I think I agree with Warren Sharp and what he said earlier about how much more improved that Falcons offense is going to be. And I'm going to take Drake London here. How are you looking on your draft?
Okay, so let me tell you where I went my last 2 moves. So this is what I picked up Dalvin Cook. But I think that in my flex spot as of right now, this is what my team looks like. Joe Burrow, Najee Harris, Dameon Pierce, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, and Dalvin Cook.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. It's so.
And how are you doing in your draft so far? So balanced.
We are on the clock. Elijah Moore, Treylon Burks went 2 picks before us. Elijah Moore went.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know.
By the way, Sky Moore just went in the 7th round. It's a little early for Sky Moore.
I would typically agree, but I think that that's where we're going to go here. Since this is positionless again, and since it is 14 teams.
Again, it's positionless, and and it's 14 teams. That's about right. And you're also looking at the Kansas City offense, and we now look at Patrick Mahomes as we know he can throw it to anybody. We know that there's going to be some moments, but I did take a lot of shares of Sky Moore in best ball because I thought now I don't have to worry about that management side of it. Is this his big week or not? But we know that Mahomes will get it done. And he's been lighting it up with him at camp.
Yeah,
Kirk Cousins is off the board.
They are taking quarterbacks. They're attacking them pretty aggressively.
Steph just said, this is the weirdest draft I've ever been. I'm like, yeah, it's a bunch of rookies in here. That's why.
And what round was that? In the 7th that Kirk Cousins went? Wow. Okay. All right.
Okay, let's do another Would You Rather with these Underdog ADP charts. We've got AJ Dillon, running back 34, ADP 102, or Zach Charbonnet, running back 36, ADP 104.7.
I think that I'm going to have to go Zach Charbonnet. I really like that draft capital that they spent on him. Pete Carroll, although we can't really trust him, let's be honest, but we know that Zach Charbonnet can play every position on this entire field. Kenneth Walker has been banged up. He was battling a groin injury going into training camp. And I just keep putting my chips in on AJ Dillon every single year, and nothing ever materializes. So I'm going to shoot for that upside with Zach Charbonnet there, and hopefully he can get some passing work as well as his rushing attempts.
I like it. And here we are, like, B and Steph keep getting ganked. So I had Pickens in my queue for the last 2 rounds. Thought if he sat there this long, he's going to make it to me. I only have 2 picks to go. He just got taken right out of my queue, just like that. And after that, J.K. Dobbins goes. So this is a really wild draft.
They're listening to the show.
Wild draft.
They knew that you wanted Pickens, and they snagged him.
Oh, man. So we've got Scott who says, I like Aaron Jones too much to take Dillon. And it brings me to Jordan Love. really excited to see this kid finally get his opportunity to get out there. And I feel like his teammates are really rooting for him. If you've seen in some of the pressers and just some of the banter on social media, they know he sat there and waited for his turn. So I think that kind of energy can be really helpful for a quarterback getting out there as the starter for his very first time. And I think these kids are going to go to work for him.
Yeah, and you look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who, if you saw on Hard Knocks, Randall Cobb told players, if he doesn't like you, he's not going to throw to you. That can kind of demoralize you as a player and as a teammate. I don't think Jordan Love has that same kind of attitude. Again, sitting back behind Rodgers, he's had time to actually develop rapport, talk to these guys, not just on a football level, but on a personal level. And once you develop that relationship, I think that I'm slowly coming around on Love. I was a little bit out on him. I'm going to have to eat my words because I think that we are going to see some pretty good things out of him this season.
Our producer, Brian Burns, who's been so amazing with all the sounders and the doors, he said, sample size on Love last season. Do you think he's really that good? Will Christian Watson have another TD-filled season with Love? I do think he is that good. And I think what can make him either better, there's something about team sports that can be so incredibly valuable. And that's what we saw with Brock Purdy, what we've seen with young players coming in and their teammates just want it. Taylor Heineke was a really great story. And I think Jordan Love has been in the system for long enough and now gets his opportunity. I hope he could utilize Christian Watson. And so, Chris told me, Lisa Ann, you should take Burks. He should be there. Obviously, he's still there. It was the late end of the 7th round. But for you and for you, Britt Flinn, for your love of Treylon Burks, he is now on my team. Treylon Burks, welcome to the squad. You come with a lot of love. You came recommended in the chat. You came recommended by the beauty that is Britt Flinn, who's brilliant. You can find her work on Fantasy Alarm. You can hear her with my friend Greg Leonard, Chattanooga, Tennessee, ESPN, all over the place. So, Treylon, you are welcomed here by my guests, and now you are here on the team. Enjoy.
I love that pick so much, and the ball god approves as well.
I was going to take Dallas Goedert, but sometimes you gotta let the room help you out. So I made that decision.
Yeah, I think Goddard's really kind of up in the air because he was second fiddle to Zach Ertz when he was there. We finally thought that he was going to get that opportunity to be second in targets, and then they go out and draft Devonta Smith. It's just kind of never been his season. And I think that Burks has that opportunity this year.
Now, I look at Freiermuth as a player who we know George Pickens is getting all the talk. We know we've all been waiting season after season. I've played Freiermuth quite a few seasons in DFS, but not had yet the courage to manage him on a season-long squad. How do you feel about him in the tight end position?
So he's one that people always overlook when they talk about rookie tight ends and how rookie tight ends never produce, blah, 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 blah. Had he not had those concussions, he was on pace to completely smash that rookie record. He just got hurt. Then last season, if you look at his usage in red zone and 2-minute drill work, he got so many targets in the red zone. I know we typically don't like to pin our fantasy hopes and dreams on touchdown dependent players, but that's where the usage backs it up. If the usage backs up the touchdowns, then I am all in. And I love him and think that he's being overlooked in quite a few fantasy leagues.
And as I look at my teams when I'm drafting, I really do like to have a lot of balance because it makes it so much more fun. By the way, Brian says, I love that you welcome the players to your team. Am I the only person that does this? I like to make it like the draft, like welcome. I don't have a hat for you. We're not in person, but I'm sending you that vibe, introducing you to your league mates. Hopefully you all like the same sandwich shop. Maybe you'll carpool from time to time.
Yeah, that's when you just put them together on the bench and you force those friendships. It's kind of like almost a seating chart in school. These kids can't sit next to each other because they talk too much. These kids are going to be friends. I think if you do that on your lineup, you can have some real chemistry on your fantasy team.
I agree. Now, Evan Ingram is a player that I really reaped benefits from last season. The fear this year is Calvin Ridley's going to take away some of the targets from Evan Ingram, but I love the trust that Trevor Lawrence has for Ingram. So do you think we're going to see a little downtick on Evan Ingram's production this season?
I do, and I hate to say it because I loved that he smashed in fantasy last season. I actually had him in my Kings Classic 14-team auction league. He did wonderfully. Now, though, with the addition of Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk is going to move back in his natural slot position. Zay Jones is still there. I think that Evan Ingram moves in line and ends up blocking quite a bit more than he did last season. And those targets and that touchdown work that he got just isn't going to be there this year.
Yeah, I can agree with you. I have one pick until I am up, and we are entering into. I am on the clock, and I am going to do it. I just went with R1. Welcome to my team. You are tight end number 1, Pat Fryermuth. I am from Pennsylvania, so though I'm from the other side of the state, Philadelphia, still really do like Pittsburgh. I like it more than Philadelphia. I love the stadiums. PNC is my favorite ballpark. So we have a lot in common. We both love Permane Brothers. It is a great sandwich place, and it's open 24 hours a day. And they put your French fries right inside your sandwich. I know you like that, Pat. We'll make sure you get lots of those. Welcome to my team.
I love that you not only welcome them to your team, but that you greet them with food and fries and sandwiches. Now I'm starving. I hope that Sellers went and got that frozen pizza for me, man.
Oh, I sure hope so too. I am in here building team chemistry. And, it's funny, but so many years of me traveling on the road, Britt, when someone mentions a city, I'm such a food person. So like, my friends that know me know food. I'm food motivated, right? So when we're going somewhere, I'll always be like, remember that sandwich shop, or do you remember that diner, or do you remember that restaurant? And so I remember every city by my favorite place that I ate there.
That's a great way to remember a place. I think, that's what draws me back to New Orleans all the time. What's your favorite place in New Orleans? Do you have a favorite place? Because it's all so good.
I really don't. Yeah, because it's not my favorite style of food, to be honest with you. So it's not my favorite place when it comes to the food thing. I'm not really that into spicy. I'm not really into Cajun. It's not really my favorite food.
Oh, I can understand that. And I will tell you, the first time I ever cut up alligator, I was like, this is not going to work. This is not good meat. But it's delicious. It's just very
It is good
different.
meat. Yeah. It's kind of like the first time, I always loved octopus. Growing up Italian family, we ate a lot of octopus. And I remember the first time I saw my grandmother preparing it and looking at it. And I'm like, why did I have to see that? I did not need to see what that looked like raw, because I like eating it so much. But that's just the thing. How are the cheesesteaks in New York City compared to Philly? Cheesesteaks are not a New York City thing. Pizza is a New York City thing, and it is irresistible. And I will admit that, probably once every 2 weeks, I just get a hankering, and I'll be like, okay, which way? I have my 4 favorite spots all in different directions. So I'm like, you know what? It gets me out, take a walk, get a couple pieces. Pizza is our thing here, not so much cheesesteaks.
Yeah, I love a good New York pizza. I worked with a family who moved to Arkansas from New York, and they would always bake New York style pizzas from scratch. He would toss the dough. He would get so angry if anybody requested a fork to eat that gigantic slice of pizza, because that is not how you eat New York pizza.
No. And if you're going to make pizza, you have to have the water flowed in from New York, because that's what makes the crust so different here. There's a chain of pizza spots called Mulberry Street, and the owner, she had the original part of the original Mulberry Street here in New York and opened them in LA, Vegas, and has the water shipped for the dough.
That's incredible. I didn't know
It's
that
not
water made such a
tap water.
difference.
Same with bagels. It's the tap water here. And so your best bagel places, when you're on the road, you ask them, where do you get your water from? And it's not New York. It's not going to be the same. We are now entering round 9. My team is Joe Burrow, Najee Harris, Damian Pierce, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Pat Fryermuth, Dalvin Cook, and Treylon Burks.
I love it. I think that team is so solid. And I'm not just saying it because of the ball, but getting Treylon Burks there, and especially welcoming him to the team after he's been chastised for being injury prone and, getting demoted to wide receiver 2. I think he's going to have a great year. He's going to be great on your team. I think that we are up shortly. I'll recap ours really quickly. After George Pickens and David Montgomery, we did go ahead and grab Sky Moore because, again, it is 14 teams. It's getting kind of yucky out here. And then we got Romeo Doubs, which, going along with that Jordan Love question and that chemistry building, love that.
Agreed for sure. Agreed for sure. Now, where can everybody find you this week, Britt
Yeah,
Flynn?
you can find me everywhere, all over the Fantasy Alarm YouTube channel and Better Sports Network. You can find me on Twitter at Britt_Flynn. ESPN Radio, you can go back and listen to that. ESPN Chattanooga. Trying to think what else. I'm doing a show on Belly Up Fantasy right after this, 30 minutes after we end. And yeah, just follow me on Twitter. All my stuff's on there. It's so much.
That is the easiest spot, and it's Britt_Flynn. And Britt, thank you so much for joining the show tonight. We have to let Howard once in a while get a little bit of time off, especially before the season takes over his life. And I love doing a show with Howard. I know you know the love. He's just such a he's got such a great energy about him, but he was missed. I did like that Hutch said that I was going to want to permanently trade in Howard for you, Britt Flynn, but we know Howard is the grand poobah here, and we have to keep him.
We have to. He is the master.
I'd like to thank Brian Birds, and to all of you, thank you so much for joining in the chat. We appreciate you. Don't forget to give a follows on all socials. Fantasy Alarm. Go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Use the code ALARM. Get $100 match on your first $100 deposit, 100% match on your first $100 deposit for new customers only. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Better Boss, for being in the room. I will be back here with you for Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on Wednesday. Britt, again, thank you so much. I hope you get a bite to eat in between shows.
Thank you so much. It was a blast.
It was a blast for all of you. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to share with your friends. Brian Burns in the studio. We appreciate you. Signing off for Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Bettor on Better Sports Network and its Alarm. Thank you again, Britt.
Thank you.